Hi, I'm Rob from Quest 88, and in this short video we're going to look at adjusting the seat on the Petra RaceRunner. It's quite a critical part of getting the RaceRunner right for an individual, and it's not just a one fix. It's something that needs to be re-evaluated depending on growth, depending on clothing, and it also requires a lot of feedback from the user as to kind of what's working for them and what's a little bit more uncomfortable. Getting used to a saddle anyway, for any kind of cyclist, race runner, especially if you've not been in one before or you've not cycled for a long time, then there's a period of adjustment that needs to happen anyway, and that needs kind of managing, and sometimes it's best if you use things like cycling shorts or cycling underwear just to minimize that discomfort whilst in the first few weeks and months you're getting that saddle position right. We also, Quest 88 also do a range of different padded saddle covers which might help with that. So we've got a few different things that we can adjust on the saddle assembly. So I'm going to call this the Droplink frame, just as a reference point. The Droplink is the part which enables us to drop the saddle out of the way for mounting and dismounting the RaceRunner. So that's an essential part, especially if you're a wheelchair user or you're fairly limited with your weight bearing ability, that you can do that, and you can either kind of stand in place and we can roll the frame back towards you, or we can transfer in different ways from the wheelchair. First thing I want to talk about is the L-shaped seat post. So we do 3 different types according to the lengths and the size of RaceRunner that we're wanting to use them on. So there's always a short side and a long side, and we can either use this to do the height adjustment, so major height adjustment on the saddle, and we can also use it in another plane where we can actually use the longer part to enable the saddle to move forwards and backwards in relation to the body support. So this one has got I think it's a medium L-shaped post. So I think it's about 10 centimetres one way, and I think about 15 centimetres the other way. And this tends to be the standard seat post that you'd get for a medium RaceRunner. This is a medium RaceRunner. If I want to do major height adjustment, so this is basically getting the seat in the right kind of ballpark area for the intended user. This is before probably the user actually goes on the RaceRunner the first time. So it's a 5mm Allen key and needs a little bit of wiggling up and down, but by twisting it up and twisting it down, I can do kind of the major height adjustment on the saddle. I'm going to take this quite high. Every time I clamp it back into position, I want to make sure that the centre line of the saddle is in line with the centre line of the frame. And I want to make sure that I do this up quite tight, which I can do. Want to avoid any chance of rotation. So the main height adjustment, that's going to be influenced a lot by the user's inside leg. The next thing I want to look at possibly is actually the angle of the seat, and we've got different RaceRunners, different styles, everybody's a different size, and in some cases we've got this at a very acute angle where the user is in a far more prone position when they're running, and then we've got runners that are virtually upright, more upright runners. Also, if you've got sprinters, people who are actually competing in the bikes, they tend to have a much kind of flatter aerodynamic posture when they're using the RaceRunner, and long distance runners, they can be a little bit more upright, so you've got some variances there as well. So I'm just going to show you where you can adjust the seat angle, and this is going to depend on how comfortable they feel. It's going to depend on a lot of feedback. It's going to sometimes have for some children, some embarrassing conversations on where it's hurting. And basically we want to, with a RaceRunner, We'll talk about this in another video. We want to make sure that the weight is equally distributed between the bottom, and we don't want a lot of contact here when the user's actually running. So it's trying to get the weight bearing right spread between the feet when they're running, or the legs when they're running, minimal contact on the saddle, but we understand there will be some. The right amount of weight distribution to the chest, but not really loading on the chest. And then the right weight distribution then on the handlebars. And what we don't want is any one part loaded, because that's where discomfort will occur. So if there's too much load bearing on the handlebars, we're going to get pains in the wrist, maybe pins and needles in the hands. So this all takes quite a lot of fine tuning. We'll talk about that in another video. Let's just go back to the seat angle. So sometimes, depending on the saddles that you use, and that there are different saddles, there are different sizes of bolts and nuts underneath the saddles. So this takes a 17mm spanner, which you have with your toolkit. And you'll see, first of all, that enables it to move in that plane, which we don't necessarily want. There is some use for that, but again, we'll cover that in another video. But basically, this is going to enable me to move the saddle forwards and backwards on the seat post. And the other thing it's going to do is enable me to change the angle quite dramatically. That is dramatic, but and again, we're trying to find, through feedback with the user, a bit of trial and error to start with, which is the most comfortable position. I'm just going to leave that loose for a minute, okay, because I want to talk about the Droplink, which is another way we can adjust the saddle height and saddle angle. And quite often this is used for fine tuning when the user is actually in and we're trying to find that happy place with the saddle. And there's two bolts here, so we're not actually using the Droplink to drop the saddle out of the way, we're using this for fine tuning. So according to whether I turn these bolts clockwise, counterclockwise, I'm basically gaining or losing height. So if I wind this in all the way, at the moment that Droplink bar is horizontal, I'm going perpendicular with the floor, and if I wind this out, I'm increasing the angle, which gives me a gain here in height on top of any height adjustment I've got here. But what this does do is it will alter quite a bit the angle here. So I need to then adjust this to offset the angle that I've created there. It's easier to make sense of this when you're actually got the user in place, and we'll do that on another video in the future. So I've got fine height and angle adjustment here, which I can quite often do with the user in place. This height adjustment I can't do with the user in place because I'm fighting, everything's fighting gravity. And then we've got the angle adjustment, which is underneath the saddle. And that covers the basic adjustments on the saddle for the Petra RaceRunner.